What is going on, everyone? I have here with me today a very special guest, Ivan Ingraham, a pretty phenomenal Marine. And Ivan, I just want to introduce you to everybody. I know you very well, just in the short time that we've gotten to know each other. But we actually, our paths were very parallel to each other for a short amount of time before I got out. And you obviously went off to do some different things. But would you mind giving a little bit of background with your Marine Corps history, everything you've done in your 24 years that you were in?
Sure, that absolutely. And I appreciate you having me on. Great to be able to actually share part of our story and then, of course, my side of that. So I joined the Marine Corps in 1997. It was going to be a means to an end, is probably going into federal law enforcement. I really had designs on being an FBI agent or U.S. Marshal or something like that. And just as I was getting ready to make that transition or examine that transition, 9/11 happened, and that changed everything for us, as we know. And that kept me in the Marine Corps and kept me serving after that until I retired in February of last year. So during the time that you and I were sort of working together, I think we went to the same schools and attended many of the same training programs, probably offset by a few months. And then by the time we would have actually been able to cross paths, you were on your way to Iraq while I was heading to ARS to be the AOIC. So I missed that initial deployment with you guys. Of course, that was the inaugural one that everyone in First Recon wanted at the time. And
Yeah, well,
yeah,
and
so
sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
well, I mean, that was sort of the one I was always kind of playing catch up with afterwards. So it was interesting when you reached out to me and we got reintroduced to each other by a mutual friend. That when I reached out to you and we started comparing notes, that we were literally like working across the hall from each other and didn't probably know it.
No, it was no. You're all good. I love you. And what were you gonna say? That was one that you're always catching up to. What did you just say there?
Oh, I was
Just with the
saying,
deployment?
yeah, having missed that initial deployment with First Recon and just kind of the way that initial part of the war, the GWAD unfolded, I felt like I was always a little bit behind with the rest of the people who had deployed and were out there. And so it took me a little while to sort of get caught up on that. And boy, did I ever. So I guess I shouldn't have wished too hard for that.
No, well, man, and that's interesting. I had a conversation just recently, and it seems to come up pretty often with veterans in general, no matter what they've done and where they've been. But we always have this look of looking at what other people have done or where other people were. Because I mean, if you read your very, very illustrious career, people would look at it down on paper and just say, "Man, this guy's a badass, like a total badass." But everybody's got, I even look at guys that I was at ARS with, people that I look up to, and just for clarification, ARS, Amphibious Reconnaissance School, for anybody that might not know that acronym, it's back in the day that used to be where any recon Marine went to school, and Ivan was actually in charge of it for some time. So anybody though, everybody we're at, no matter where we're at, we tend to look back and say, well, what about this one? And we always have that one person that was, we kind of compare notes to, and it's just an interesting thing that no matter who I seem to talk to, everybody has that one space. But so you were in charge of recon school?
I was.
Oh, wait, yeah. Tell me about that.
I started out in the infantry. I went over to First Recon. At the time, it was a company and standing up into battalion. I became part of 7th Platoon, which later turned into Charlie Company, and was sent to the basic reconnaissance course at Coronado. And at the time, there was an East Coast and a West Coast school. And then I served in First Recon after getting finished with BRC, going through a pipeline of training, and as a platoon commander, left First Recon in the middle part of 2002 and assumed the duties as the assistant officer in charge at ARS, and did sort of a port and starboard turnover with the very famous Doug Zembeck, who ended up being a very, very close friend of mine. Good person, great mentor, awesome friend. And from that point, I was hooked. being in Recon, I was hooked that was all I ever wanted to do and where I wanted to serve, and being able to be the AOIC at a school like that, where you're able to have impact and train the next generation and the next groups of people, and then successfully see how people were successful overseas based upon the training that we were putting people through. That was a great mark of kind of professional satisfaction. And then later would serve with many of the people that helped train and educate there, and also people who are on staff at the course. Not only sometimes as platoon sergeants or team leaders, but also people within your unit. So it was a very tight community. It was a great opportunity. If I couldn't get deployed at that point in time with First Recon, which I did want to do, I was at least able to have an impact and stay in pretty close touch with the community, all while the incredible things that were happening in the early part of the GWAT in both Afghanistan and Iraq were unfolding. And I was there till 2005, and then went to Second Force as a platoon commander. And at that point, we stood up MARSOC shortly thereafter, and that was the rest of my career in varying capacities.
So what did you do with MARSOC?
Because we were Second Force, at the time when they stood up MARSOC in 2006, they took First and Second Force reconnaissance companies and used them as the base organizations to form MARSOC, the assault platoons, and what was at the time called the Direct Action Special Reconnaissance Platoon, which eventually was not disbanded, but they transformed those into the more current team structure and company alignment that kind of came a few years later. So while I was there, I was a plank owner. I was able to be part of the Direct Action Special Reconnaissance unit. After that, I was an XO for a battalion, and then later went and commanded a company, and then became a training officer at the regimental and then component levels. And then I did 2 stints as an LNO inside of JSOC units, where I eventually retired. So I kind of had a breadth of experience across not only working in MARSOC, but also with other special operations forces, to include the national level.
Wow. It's impressive. I mean, you said something earlier that I just want to, if you can just expand on it. You said plank owner. If you could share with anybody that may not know, what does it mean to be a plank owner?
Sure. In the naval terminology, if you were the first or part of the first complement of people to man a new ship, i.e. when they were laying the planks of the deck of a ship, you would be considered what is called a plank owner. You were one of the first members to be in that organization. Now, I'm sure there will people who will listen to this and sneer that, they were newer. I was a boot to them. The first guy who got recruited in Ton Tavern was probably telling people in the Marine Corps what it used to be like. So I think I think I can just lay claim to where I was at the time. And, there were certainly people who came before me who helped pave that way. But yeah, I was there when they opened the doors. So that was an interesting place.
Oh man. Well, look, and that, it's an incredible play. I was just telling you earlier about a buddy of mine, Cody, that, we went through ARS together, deployed in that initial invasion with First Recon together. But we talk about how amazing it would have been, literally just a conversation we had just 2 weeks ago, how amazing it would have been to have stayed in to be a plank owner. And so just circling back to that conversation earlier, how I think we all look at each other and think about just what could have been. And I think there's a lot for us to unpack as veterans in general, just about that mentality. So
I agree. And I worked with, absolutely to your point, there were people that I looked up to, thought like, that is who I want to be. That is the way I want to carry myself. That's the direction that I'd like to take my career or do the things that these people do. There will always be somebody else who's got that piece you're looking at. And some people say that comparison is the thief of joy. Maybe in some degrees, but I think in that military side where you need to find people who motivate you, and even in life, you need to find people who motivate you and make you want to be better, move to perform at higher levels. And they were there, and they whether they passed a selection, were in a different unit, or they were just the way that they presented themselves. There was always something to be gained, and I always kind of shudder that someone might have looked at me and said, "Yeah, that's what I want to be like." I hope not, but maybe I will. Maybe I was to somebody at that point in time. But
I'd be willing to bet that you definitely were, and probably continue to be that. Just as I hear about everything you're doing these days, which I'm excited to unpack with you as well. And so you got out just last February, you said?
Yeah, I haven't even. The 1st of February will be a full year since retirement.
Wow. So
So
you have, I mean, literally, we're just a week away from full year,
that's right.
almost.
That's right.
Yeah, week and a half away. That's okay. And I want to ask too, just for context as well. What rank did you get out as? I mean, after spending 24 years in.
I was a lieutenant colonel,
Okay, a lieutenant colonel.
and
And
I
I
wasn't
want
I
to
was not
just
prior
dive into.
enlisted. Wasn't prior enlisted. I just came in right off the street.
And thank you for clarifying that. When you think about getting out, having been out for 1 year, how's your transition from being in the military? Um, how's it been, just in general, getting out of the military? What's it been like for you?
It was a lot like, and I've used this analogy a couple of times. I imagine it's like in the Shawshank Redemption when Brooks, the James Whitmore, the old inmate who's just doesn't know anything else except where he was, and he gets released into the big, wide, scary world. I think that that's kind of how I saw it. I think a lot of veterans may see it, particularly if you're a career veteran. Um, I knew one thing. That was all I was geared towards. It was how I woke up and spent my days. I got to do some really interesting and fun things that I enjoyed, and that all kind of just came to an end. And I knew it was ending. It was, kind of a slow off ramp as I exited the military. I started my transition about 18 months out from when I actually retired. So I tried to come up with a plan to make this landing as soft as I could. But one way or the other, the day of the EAS, the final EAS, was looming, and then one day you're out. And I went to Quantico and picked up my DD 214 and walked across the bridge at OCS over to the where they do the train, officer training, and just took a look around because that's where I came in so long ago, and that was it. And so the next thing you know, you're kind of out in this world that you have to adjust to. Most of the people around you are not very familiar with how you did stuff, and you yourself are having a hard time transitioning or translating that as you transition. So I found that despite the preparation that I was ostensibly not only conducting but planning to apply against my transition, I was in fact not as ready for it as I thought. And I kind of had to reset once I got out, because I'd gotten into an internship which didn't work out particularly well for me getting a job. And the more that I started looking at the things I really wanted to do, it lent more towards pursuing passions, vice earning a lot of money. And I'm not unhappy at all with having gone after sort of my artistic side, but that comes at a bit of a cost. And what that is just you really kind of have to find your way to success and defining what that is. And if I look back over a year, I can actually say that I've been pretty successful, even if monetarily it has not been an avalanche. So I'll pause there, but it's
Well,
you know
no, and is that what you mean? I'd like to ask you a little bit further about your reset. You said you got out, you had this big plan, you spent 18 months planning to get out. So I'd say you definitely, for the best of your abilities, had a solid plan going into getting out, and then you felt you had to do a reset. What was that reset like? What did that come about?
I think that really comes down to the fact that there's a little bit of an expectation, or at least there was on my side, that you get out, you leave the military, and you're going to look for corporate jobs. You're going to look for things that help capitalize on your strengths. All of these are positive items that people should examine in the way they transition. But I came to find that corporate environment, even the military in itself is sort of a corporate environment. That immediate transition, because it was comfortable, was not the thing that I wanted to go and do. And so the harder I pursued or started leaning towards the things sort of that were expected, quote unquote, of me, the less inclined I was to want to actually do that. And the more I began to realize that I had a valuable opportunity to examine what it is that not only brought me joy and happiness, but also what would make me thrive. And there's an old saying, find what makes you come alive and go and do that. John Eldredge in his book, Wild at Heart, says that. And that is a hard thing to do, particularly if you got money concerns, you've got kids in school. It's hard to be this whimsical, I'm just going to do whatever I want. I was actually in a very good position as I left the military to explore other avenues. And in my case, it was writing, it's been coaching, it's been, I like doing podcasts and having leadership discussions with people. And also finding out that I was better off doing things that I wanted to pursue to see where it would lead by just diving into something based upon, and I keep saying expectation, but yeah, this sort of societal understanding that you're a military officer, you're going to get out and then you're just going to transition into whatever it happens to be, corporate wise or some sort of consulting agency. Of course, I'm talking out of two sides of my mouth. I have my own consultancy, my own company that I work with. But that's so that I can put my ideas against the problem set by taking a problem set that's been presented to me from some other entity and giving them my best work, which again, I decided I didn't want to do. I hope that helps clarify it. I mean, sometimes I still get my head around it myself.
No, I think it's absolutely incredible. And I appreciate you sharing so much with it, because I think that no matter when you get out, no matter how much planning that you had, how much time you spend out, I think a lot of veterans struggle with getting out and what it's like to actually step foot back into the civilian sector.
Well, what I came to find is that there wasn't a lot of expectation for anyone in the civilian sector to really understand me. And in fact, many of them didn't want to. And that's not a castigation on society. It's just saying that there has been such a disconnect between veterans and the country that it was I who was different, even though I felt that I had served well and done things appropriately to help with my transition. I found during my interviews and some of the other job searches that I did that most of the people were very disconnected from the veteran experience. And some of them wanted to know, but in a lot of ways, it was really just sort of, well, let's get past this so we can talk about what it is you can do for the company. And people told me I could be a project manager and I would be great at personnel management and interactive engagements and all kinds of other, honestly, corporately centered things. And the more I saw it, I just said, this is just not the direction I want to go. And this is not a justification that I want to give. And that maybe makes me sound a little snobby, but it was better for me to know exactly what I didn't want to do so that I could explore the avenues to finding what I want to do. And I'm still kind of doing that, but I'm much more comfortable in a much better space than I would have trying to fight my way into something I didn't feel passionate about, which I've learned early on is that it's a driving factor for me. I have to believe in the process and what I'm trying to do.
Well, just for your situation in particular too, I love, and I know we're going to talk more about what you're currently doing as well, and just your tenacity and adversity with continuing to move forward. And I think that's one thing that separates you from a lot of other veterans that I do get to talk to, that I do get to interact with, is that there's no stopping point of, I'm just going to go sit on the couch and woe is me type of thing. And I don't think anybody throws it up in that way. But you're just continuing to step forward. You're continuing to say, okay, let's pivot from this and move into the next space. And I love that about you. I love hearing your story and everything that you're doing. So I appreciate you sharing it.
Well,
tell us. Oh, no, please. Yeah.
I was just going to say that as we found some of this training, once you got to the end of the day and you reflected on it, you're like, man, that was pretty hard. And it was worse than yesterday, which means tomorrow will be horrible. So I better get my 6 hours of sleep and just because you have no other choice, and so at the school you could quit and then you just feel terrible. And in life, if you quit, you're just going to run out of options. So there's no point. You're just going to have to, if you're talking about things that you take with you, particularly in the type of training and things that we were involved in, that mental reset is vitally important, because there are times where you just feel demoralized and like you're not moving forward, progressing.
Mm.
You get another. I've had a few rejection letters. I've talked to editors. I've talked to people who I'm interested in pitching some of my work to, and they just tell you straight up they're not interested or they don't have time. You put a lot of time and effort into that, and someone says that they don't like your artwork and it's not going to get hung on the refrigerator. That can be a little bit of a blow, and you got to just keep going. So,
well, you just made me think of, and I always credit Gunny Rummel, which I know he got knocked down quite a bit ago. He put us through a kind of pre-recon school. I don't know if that name rings a bell for you,
sure.
But I always credit him for it. But I know, like, I've heard SEALs get credit for it. I don't know who actually said it, but the last easy day was yesterday. And just to what you had said earlier, I was like, well, yesterday was tough, and today was tougher. That means tomorrow is going to be it's going to be a beast. So let's get some rest and make it happen.
And the other thing is, at some point they got to feed you, so it's going to end.
Right? Yeah.
Very much.
Exactly. hopefully getting fed. Man, well, and man, I'd love to hear and just let you share with everybody about what you're currently doing. I know right now you have Golden Compass LLC. You mentioned some books. I actually ordered. It just came in the mail yesterday. I have your book, The Patrol. Got a paperback copy of it. I'm looking forward to diving into it. But would you mind sharing a little about what you're currently doing and what Golden Compass does?
Sure. I'm the CEO for a leadership company called Golden Compass LLC. It's founded by a guy named Jay Lee. He is a former SOF, Special Operations Forces, EOD, Explosive Ordnance Disposal Technician. We actually did not work together, although he worked with Marine, MARSOC EOD guys. He spent the majority of his time working with the Army and and Navy Special Warfare. And he and I met actually at a company that we no longer work for, just because we were not excited about that culture and decided we'd form our own group and see what we could develop. And so we are a leadership consulting company that specializes in communication, personal finance, which is not hedge funding. It is not stock picks. And it is more about like how to manage your funds inside of what you make, living within your means, so that you can actually establish more freedom of action within your life. And then from there, we also teach leadership and communication. So that's sometimes individuals, sometimes that's organizational culture, keynotes. And we work, like I said, keynotes, workshops. And we also have a podcast called the Live Free series. And Jay's the primary host with that, but sometimes I come on and we talk to different guests. So reciprocity, Thad, we probably do well to have you on to kind of talk with you about your own journey and the things that you have done, not only as a Marine, but and then in post career and your own journey. So we're always interested in other people's perspectives. And then from there, I'm also a writer. I'm a freelance writer. I've done some work for the online periodical Task and Purpose. Another one's The War Horse. I've had a little bit of commentary and things delivered to various entities worldwide, particularly on some of the perspective I provided on the early stages of the Ukraine war. And then, as you noted, I'm also a fiction author. I have a page on Amazon with currently 2 short stories, one called Athena, and one called The Patrol. And I'm working on another one right now called 22. That should be out right around the middle of February. And then I'm also working on a couple of screenplays and some novels. So I do a little bit of writing everywhere. I may be a D-list author, but someone's heard of me. And
I've got your book.
Yeah,
one of them.
Yeah, right. And between those, keeps me pretty busy. Other than that, it's I got plenty of time to ride horses and goof off. So,
well, man, I love how
it's not too bad.
Humbly say just a little bit of writing, listing off everything that you've done. Just picking any one of those things, I think, would be a career for some. So, yeah, incredible. And what is 22? I want to, just because that number rings a bell
Right.
for a couple of things.
22 is the projected number, unfortunately, and it may be higher, of the number of veterans who commit suicide every day. I hope that it's not more. I do believe that that statistic is probably low. And 22 actually is examining in a fiction, in a method fiction story, a guy's descent into darkness based upon how he is feeling because of his career, family engagements, all these things that seem to build up into a mental time bomb that eventually some people just can't, or they feel like they can't escape. And so I was working very closely with a guy named Dan Jarvis, who runs a company called 220.org, which addresses mental health and mental recovery, as well as my friend Scott Husing, who has a fundraising nonprofit name called Save the Brave. These are all, there's a number of different entities out there, but these are people who are veterans themselves who have gone through very dark times, and come out the other side in, I would say, changed for the better, and then are inspired to want to help other people. And so I'm trying to not only capture the energy that these organizations and these two friends of mine have passed on to me in trying to address this very critical mental social problem, but also the story that I'm telling is one that's pretty difficult, but I think, unfortunately, very universal to a lot of veterans who, to your point of transition, when they get out, we've been given some tools, some avenues to have conversations, but having that with people who really understand you and can appreciate, I would call it the burden of service. Some of that is shame. Some of that is anger. Some of that is longing. Some of that is a feeling of not connecting, perhaps even with their families or friends. And that will take a mental toll, and has taken a mental toll, to people who just somehow feel like they get into a dark space that they cannot get out of. And so the full title is 22, A Journey to the Edge of Darkness. I will not spoil kind of how that is going to unfold, but I promise that I am attacking this in a way that is very different than things that I've written. All of my stories are different, but the method in which I'm approaching this is actually going to be, I think, unique and at the same time compelling.
I'm very excited for this story, and I love that you're taking it head on too, because as you pointed, it can be a very difficult topic to discuss. Yet I love that you're jumping in to tell this story, because it's one that needs to be, it can't be overstated. It needs to be shared.
Yeah, and there's a vulnerability there. There's a vulnerability there, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, you saw the greatest in most combat, right? It can just be as a result of service and choices that you made and things that may have happened. People experience all kinds of trauma and traumatic events that they have to process. And, if you're in the military service, certainly, but law enforcement, fire department, having to clean up an accident, all kinds of stuff. Heck, just imagine the family coming home to find one of the 22 every day. And there have been, unfortunately, people in my own life who I've known who seem to have been doing well, and then the next thing you know, we're talking about them, and one of them was a close friend of my son's, and unfortunately, it's just who was a teammate of his on his lacrosse team that I coached in high school, and unfortunately, these things are just, they're irreversible, and the impact of that shouldn't be understated, and in fact, as I said, the method in which I'm tackling this is, I think, a little more unique. I'm patting myself on the back as the author here, but I guess I've had plenty of time to think about it, because I've spent some of my own time on the edge of that darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not a plea for help. This is not some cry that I've done, bad things and had to come back from it. It's just a matter of, I can put myself in those situations where the burden of your service, the frustration that you feel of trying to reconcile all that against, as I said earlier in the podcast, the society that kind of doesn't understand you. That is a really tough place to be, and you really don't know if you can turn to people for help. And I'm not going to get into a big comparison as to which method of treatment and mental adjustment is best or better for anyone else. But I will say that the protocol that Dan Jarvis and his guys have with 220.org is something worth looking at and shouldn't be discounted.
Okay. Well, I'm just jotting that down, and man, I really appreciate you sharing this. This kind of was a wonderful addition into this conversation that I wasn't expecting. And just, I don't know when this podcast that we're recording right now is going to launch, but knowing that your book is going to launch in the next couple of weeks, if this doesn't line up, with your permission, I'd love to throw a link for that book into the bottom of this podcast so that anybody listening can.
Yeah, it'll be available
on
my Amazon. It'll be available on my Amazon page, my writer's page, my author's page. And I've had people asking about Audible versions of my work too, all in due time. It took a while. First it was Kindle, and then we started doing hard copies, which are actually people are ordering and more popular than I thought they would be. And then of course the next question is, when are you going to do it on Audible? And I suppose the next question after that is when I'm going to do some sort of live action. Yeah. We'll get there. I'm talking to producers every once in a while about some of these projects, so I wouldn't put it past it. I'd love to see some of this stuff come to life.
Wow. That's an incredible. Thank you for taking the time to share it. And you said something quite a bit ago that piqued my interest. You mentioned personal finance. Mm-hmm. Do you deal with individuals on that, or is it more of a company type things? I know you do a lot of corporate stuff. What do you do with personal finance?
We do both. But yeah, it's generally individual coaching. And then we have found not only with the financial coaching, but also in the personal coaching, when it comes to price point, people are like, oh, I don't know if I want to spend that kind of money. Well, one way or the other, people who are in financial arrears are spending money. And it depends on how you want to address getting out of that financial problem that you're in. And it could be, some of them are quite high, as a matter of fact, and helping people find a path that will get them out of. I mean, money is one of the biggest stressors in the U.S. It's one of the biggest stressors in any relationship. And there's all kinds of good things that can come with it, and there's all kinds of bad things that can come when people say, "Oh, if I had more money," well, what you would have is more problems, because if you're not able to manage and live within the framework that you've provided for yourself, more money is just going to allow you to continue on the same path with just more options. So we say that it's really about an investment. I mean, I'm a professional writer, and I have a writing coach. I have someone who helps me with my publishing and editing. Yes, that costs me money, but on the other side, it's an investment in my future. It is my chosen craft, and that's how you get better. And we found that obviously is, we're in the military and reconnaissance and everything else. You want to become a better shooter, you need to work with people who are better at shooting than you. You want to be better at jumping out of airplanes? Well, go find the guy who jumps at Red Bull. Ironically, Red Bull has not called me for an audition on their skydiving team since I got out. So I probably wasn't as good at that as I thought I was going to be, and found I probably had to move on to something else. So I hope that helps clarify that. But that's kind of what we look at, is trying to deconstruct a problem set and then help people find solutions.
When I love that you mentioned it, and that came up because to me, I think that's something we don't give enough credit to, because if you've got insert any problem that you're having, whether it's a relationship problem, whether it's spouse, kids, friends, whatever the case may be, insert money problems, and this problem just became much more difficult. Whatever you're facing with relationships, again, kids, work, wherever it is, if you have financial problems, that's just going to magnify everything else that you've got going on. And circling back to the 22 aspect, that I think a lot of people would, I mean, if you're struggling with certain areas of your life, don't magnify it by having financial problems. Find a coach like yourself to.
You look at someone like Kate Spade, who unfortunately committed suicide, and she was of course world famous as a couture provider of all kinds of things that people were envious of. But this woman was absolutely mentally just distraught, from her relationship disintegration to her business to all these other items. So money wasn't going to solve that. And this is I'm not a therapist, right? I'm not a licensed psychologist. I'm just, as an observer, I know what it is to lay awake at night and wonder how you move the money around in the shell game to try and get stuff paid for. I know what it is to think about the relationships that you have that may or may not suffer. I mean, there are tons of inputs that compound towards that mental status or that breakdown in mental status that we're talking about. And so I think one of the things, particularly in the military training that we went through, and others have, although it's a small percentage of the military that does it, um, your mental perseverance in some capacities are tested in many ways so that you know that you can do more, whether you're tired, whether you're frustrated. Swimming in cold water never gets any more fun. Being in very hot environments and keeping your temper under control. Now be a commanding officer inside of that, and you've got people expecting decisions to be made in rapid succession, and you have to be right, and you have to live with the things that you do. When those are happening in real time, you're well prepared for that. But if you have time to think about it, that's when the demons come, I think. And so I would love to see more people balanced and able to address all the things in their lives and their parts without it feeling overwhelming. And that's where the personal coaching, the financial coaching. I mean, I've talked to many rich people who say, I don't need anything from you because I'm successful and rich. Well, you actually need it worse than anybody because you already think you got it all figured out. And that's my opinion, but that's some of the conversations I have.
Oh yeah. Well, there's this great book that I love called The Psychology of Money. I don't know exactly when it was written, but I absolutely loved it. And he always talked about it. It really made some light bulbs go off for me, but he talks about it doesn't matter how much money you make, because people that make bad money decisions at, let's call it $50,000 a year, when they make 75, they just move the goalpost and they just make more bad decisions.
Absolutely.
And their problems remain the same. The problems are literally the same exact problem. So insert however much money that you're making, we move the goalpost, and we tend to spend more than we're making. So we're always kind of living on the edge. Well, not hopefully we're not always doing that, but some people that are making those bad decisions continue to do that. And so it creates big problems. A really awesome friend of mine, Mike Bull, he's actually a neurosurgeon now. We got out of the military. He's enlisted. He's an incredibly brilliant guy. So this story I'll share about him it won't come as a surprise, but he got a full ride to Michigan Medical School. Like, a really, really smart guy. But I remember we're packing up our rooms, our barracks rooms to leave. And he's like, "Oh, how much money did you save?" And I was like, "Well, we got back from deployment, but I got like $6-7 from deployment, like literally from deployment. I probably would have not had that had it not been the second deployment I went on." And I asked him, "How much money did you save?" And he's like, "I think he had like $50,000, $45,000. Like, what? How is it an enlisted? You don't make much more than that in 4 years. Like, it's not even that much money that you bring in. And granted, all your everything's covered, but that was a big light bulb moment for me. Because people tend to blame how much money they're making, or I need to make more money. It's like, yeah, get more money, go make more money, but address what you're doing with your current finances. So I love that you pointed out personal finance and how much stress it adds to people. And so people could reach out to you also to get help with that as well.
Absolutely. It's goldencompassllc.com. I'm available on LinkedIn at Ivan F. Ingram. I have an unmistakable avatar. It'll pop right up. Just drop me a line. Or Jay Lee. That's JAYLLY. And we have Golden Compass on a LinkedIn as well. We have a LinkedIn page. But feel free. Yeah, reach out to us, and we're happy to have a conversation. Happy to help organizations, especially entry-level people who are really trying to figure out how to manage their money and live well so that they can thrive on what they're making instead of focusing on how much more they would like to make. We love to get in with organizations to do that. And we're leadership guys, and we've been doing this a long time. Between the two of us, we've got about 40 years of experience, and quite a number of mistakes made, I'll be honest. Wouldn't you like to benefit from that? So
yeah. Oh yeah, man. Well, and thank you. I'm going to link all of that down below in the podcast, so that wherever you're listening, hopefully it's just one click away that you don't have to pause, rewind, and try to grab it. But we will definitely link all of that below. And we were linked up, a really great friend of mine, a guy I have had the privilege of working with. He's a mentor of mine, Bill Raymond. He linked us up together because his daughter and your daughter both went to West Point together, or they're at West Point now.
They're both graduated. They're now Army officers.
Okay.
They graduated last May. And yes, they played lacrosse together at West Point, and that was a heck of an opportunity. not only for them as players, but also just as for going to school. And I had a great opportunity. It was great to meet Bill and his family, and yeah, we became pretty close through that. So I was glad he connected us, and as a mutual friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and just as we were talking in the initial conversation, I guess the first one was really just seeing how parallel our careers were in the military and how close we were in proximity by just a couple of weeks, probably leaving different units bouncing around. But you mentioned something that stood out to me, talking about your daughter going to West Point. That, and correct me if I'm off base with this quote, but you mentioned that it was not so much the school that you're going to, the course that you're going to. What was more important was your attitude and your drive going into that school. Do you remember that? And
yeah,
if you don't mind stepping into it a little bit, sharing about it.
Yeah. So, and I will say that Allison, my daughter, and Bill's daughter Caroline would be probably be first to tell you that West Point is a great school to be from. So like while they were there, it was not the most enjoyable experience. A very tough place. You have to be mentally resilient. It's not just academics. You're going to the field. It's legit military training. It's a leadership course in school. I used to, truth in lending, not have a heck of a lot of time for or respect for the academy institutions. And that changed dramatically once I saw and gave it a chance as to what they were actually doing there. And I think they produce the whole system produces a fairly competent officer if people pay attention. You have to want to embrace what's being presented to you. The one thing that Allison really wanted to do was play lacrosse in college, and she got involved in a travel program. We were living in North Carolina called Carolina Fever, and through that program, we traveled all over the country, and she was acknowledged by West Point as well as quite a few other Division I schools to go and play. And then she just gravitated towards there, went up for a school visit and said, this is where I want to go to school. And I let her know that, that would be a tremendous opportunity and also a tremendous commitment. There'd be no other way around it, because your life becomes the school, and the school legitimately becomes your life. And I think that she grew while she was there in such a way that she really embraced that. And some people do not. And that's fine. That isn't a castigation on people who decide that's not for them, or they withdraw, or quite frankly, academically, it's too challenging for them and they need to go somewhere else. I can completely appreciate that. And one day she was like, Dad, I don't know if I want to keep playing here. I don't know if I want to keep going. It's really challenging. It's very difficult. I think something's going to have to give. And she's like, I just don't know how long I can do this. And I said, well, I don't know how long you can do this either, but I know how you'll feel if you quit. So it really is up to you, but there's no middle ground, because you have to finish at this point. And she, at that point, kind of buckled down. And Bill will tell you that we had the Christmas morning moment when they beat Navy at home. Sorry, Naval Academy, for the first time in their lacrosse, history, women's lacrosse history, in Annapolis, and that was an absolutely stunning upset and great moment. And so those moments all paid off. But the key is, it's hard work, it's perseverance, it's understanding where you are and embracing that moment for what you're doing. And I think that training that I keep referring to, sort of as the inside connection that you and I have, is we know what it is to be faced with that, and you really have to make those choices. I have all kinds of analogous stories, but I'll pause there again. I hope that mentions it. If there's something else I need to address, I'll be glad to.
No, it was beautifully said. I love that you mentioned it. And just when you said, I know how you feel if you'll quit, I mean, to me, that could be the closing sentence of your book 22. Because
well, that has already been written.
Okay. Yeah. No, I just, to me, it's
the end has been written, and it's It's got its own. It's got its own.
Yeah, no, it just made me think of that. We're talking about a schoolhouse, and to me, that was why I wanted to bring it up, because I think that um, knowing your daughter went to West Point, really tough, really grueling course. Couldn't even imagine what that's like. Knowing that you were in charge of Amphibious Reconnaissance School, you were definitely a huge piece and a very, very difficult course. I think you know what it takes for somebody to step in and do something difficult. And so I was hoping just to pick your brain on, what do you think separates people heading into difficult situations? What does it take? What's the mentality? What is the separation point when you see people that are going into it? Can you tell right away? Maybe you know that this person's going to make it, this one's not. And what's the separation point?
Wow. I'm laughing just because let's just look at my own transition from the military. I mean, I tried to do everything right and put it together, even though I felt that the direction I was headed was not correct. So I tried to force something that wasn't there. If you were, so there, that's the first part. If your mental and emotional state, your heart and your mind are not aligned to the goal that you want to get into, and those are at odds, you will constantly struggle. And you kind of question, why am I here? What is this about? What do I want out of all of this? And so my transition was quite difficult for that. And I'm glad that I was able to, as I said, reset. Although I had to get out of the military to finally see that that was not the direction I want to go. I was very lucky to have a set of mentors and people who were available to me to talk through just what the next steps could look like. I think, I don't know if there's any way to tell. And I trained hundreds of Marines at ARS, and I also was a participant in many different schools. Gosh, I'm just tooting away on my own horn here, but it's the truth. Like I went through a lot of schools that had sometimes washout rates as high as 70%. I went through courses that barely 10% of the people who started would finish, let alone get to move on to the next phase. And so on one level, I was very successful, mentally and physically prepared. On the other, there's a little bit of luck that comes into that. I'm not going to hang that on that, but you want to eliminate or mitigate, because you really can't eliminate. You want to mitigate as many of the variables as possible to set yourself up for success. So you need to do your research and get in to a good mindset. And I would say it also helps to get around people who help build you up and help keep you buoyant, because these things that people undertake are extremely difficult. And any endeavor in life, you're going to have to put in some serious work. And whether that's as a writer, right? Like it doesn't just come to me. I'm sorry, I keep clearing my throat. As a writer, it just doesn't come to me. I have to work hard at it. I have to work with other people to coach me along. But as you set off on this journey, you have to understand that you almost you're now a part of this process, and you have to learn as you go along. You can't go in there thinking you know it all. Too many curves, too many variables, too many things can happen. You can get injured. You can have something happen that just is outside of your control. I think that the other part in all of this is a belief that what you are doing is going to actually be an investment in yourself, so that all of the hard work feels like something that is intrinsically good for you. Because if you don't believe that, if something does happen and you don't pass the training or the school, you fail an exam, etc., and you're not able to bounce back and learn from those experiences, you'll become mired in them. And then they'll really start to drag you down. And then that goes into the tenets that I have in 22. People spend a lot of time on a treadmill in their mind, awfulizing and talking through decisions and what ifs and could haves. And I've been there. I mean, believe me, at night, when my demons are sitting on the edge of the bed and I want them to go away, the treadmill's on high reps, and I'm trying to get through it as you try and realize that there may have been a positive to all these things that are coming your way. or came your way. But I think people get a little bit too stuck in the thing that they feel got them to where they are instead of how to get out of it. And I think that was, some of the training that we went through. There was only one way out, and you had to finish. And sometimes that could be extremely difficult to ascertain, let alone employ or conduct. And those that had it together and those that could function did really, really well. But I saw big muscled guys thrive just fine and just managed to, kind of knock the trees out of the way as they wandered through the earth. And I watched people who literally had a rucksack the size of their body with 2 legs underneath it outwalk anybody in the woods for days at a time. And all of the MMA fighters and loudmouths left really fast. So, but I would never look at somebody and write them off. There were generally traits once I got to see them that I could say, yeah, that's probably not going to lend too well for you. You get peered out or something that might happen. But man, oh man, you could get surprised by just looking at people.
Definitely, and I meant that not from the stance of prejudging, but from what you did give in there too. And I was just taking notes with it. I love how you shared that, the mental game going into it. What's your mental game? The group of support people around you. Do you have people help pushing you forward, supporting you, and then also your belief in what you're doing? Those 3 things right there that you mentioned are huge. That are really going to be able to support you to get through most difficult things in life, be it a school or something we get out into the civilian sector. We're out. I think all 3 of those things still apply today. So,
I think it gets a little harder in the civilian world, at least from what I've seen. I mean, you have people you might go out and have a beer with, etc. But that true group of people, like there was nothing like that. Just a really tough training event or something that you were involved in. Heck, even combat, being able to look over at someone and be, that you went through that stuff with and sort of just have that wry smile, like, hey, it's going to be all right.
Yep.
Even when it was very not all right.
Like, no, well, that's the times that you look back on. I was thinking about with your daughter, and where you were talking about how difficult, you said West Point was a place to be from. And immediately I was just thinking, well, I bet there's, after you're from there, all those stories that the difficult times become the times you remember and that you love to reflect on and talk about. Those were the best of times. Just not while you're in them, but when you reflect on them, we tend to love those.
I think I was most happy when all of it was over.
Yeah. Absolutely. Ivan, thank you so much for giving us your time, for stepping in and sharing everything that you did. If you could, I'd love for, just if you don't mind, if you could leave somebody that, knowing you put this much time into 22, and if you think anybody's listening that might be struggling, anything they're going through, what advice would you toss up to anybody?
Oh, wow. The tough times don't last. There's a quote, tough times don't last, tough people do. The light will eventually come on. Like, you will start to find the way out, if you will. And the Afghans have a proverb: there's a path to the top of the tallest mountain, and you just got to keep climbing. And sometimes it means just stopping for a minute and taking a knee and taking an assessment. And this is not to say that, you're hit rock bottom and there's nothing else, because if you have to ask that you're at rock bottom, you're not there yet. So don't keep digging. Just stop for a second and take a look around. And that's one thing I told my daughter, actually, the first day she got picked up to go. It's called our day, the reception day. It's a pretty emotional day up in West Point when your children get pulled off in the U.S. Army, and then that's it. I told her 2 things. One, you have enough time to do it right, so just pause and take a moment just to understand what's going on around you while there's a ton of chaos. And then the second is just make it to lunch. If that's all you can do in the day, then go get to the thing that's going to help you just, reset. Because it's all these little pieces. If there's a bunch of compounding things that will stack up on you that lead to big weights, there's also little outlets along the way as you travel I like to think of myself as a guide. A guide doesn't tell you what to do. A guide kind of gives you the information you need to know, and you can become your own guide along a very difficult path. But you gotta slow down, and maybe that's what we need to do more of, because this world is just full of nothing but inputs and online requirements on our phones, and horrible comparisons, like I said, of someone's success and happiness and what they're doing and how you're feeling compared against it. And I go through it myself. Believe me, I've got all kinds of influences and external pieces that create the baggage that we all carry around. But it's not just enough to reach out to somebody and say, I'm struggling. You got to take your self-care first, and then, certainly reach out if you can. There's plenty of options out there, but I would rather someone just be on a knee and making an assessment of where they are, as absolutely as much despair as they may be feeling, you're still feeling it. And if you can do that, then you're alive. And if you're alive, then you can take action. And then from there, we can fix it. I can fix any problem. Come see me.
Yeah, man, I love that. And it just made me think of two things. First time doing night land nav, when you're just lost in the sauce, unsure of where to go, can't see anything. Best thing to do is take a knee and assess where you're at. And then I loved closing it out on, you mentioned make it to lunch. It just made me think of chow to chow. Just got to get to the next meal.
Like I said, they got to feed you. They got to feed you at some point.
Get to the next meal. You can stop and assess and keep moving forward. Ivan, thank you so much for all of your time. I really appreciate you stepping on, and I look forward to staying in touch in the future.
You bet, Dad. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Have a good one.
You too. Thanks.